Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the It's About Time Writers Reading Series. And I have lost track. I think it's coordinating with the month of the year. So this might be reading number 406. So welcome. We go way back, but it's always wonderful to have new people join us. Whether they're first time reading or their first time doing what I call now the return of the writer's craft, plus our 3-minute open mic. And I'm going to be practicing timing tonight in case anybody goes long. But unfortunately, those of you who are here for Catherine Thurber-Smith, she has had a work conflict and isn't able to join us tonight. But I'm glad that you are all here. And this will be recorded and should be available on not only the It's About Time YouTube site, but potentially the Seattle Public Library site. So welcome, glad to have you all here. Our first speaker, presenter, reader tonight is Lill. She writes professionally as C. Lill Ahrens, and she comes recommended by our good friend Jennifer D. Monroe, who has been working with her now that she has moved south. So I'm delighted to finally get to hear what has been raved about to me. So Lill is an award-winning author, story writing teacher, and retired editorial consultant with many award-winning published students and clients. Since 2008, she's given numerous presentations and workshops for writing conferences and organizations. The only thing she likes better than writing is helping writers succeed. And I am so with you there, Lill. So I can't wait to hear your words of wisdom. So welcome, Lill.
It's great to be with you up there. Okay, so I wanted to say before I actually begin, I have to forewarn you, I'll be sticking close to my notes, and I know a lot of audiences don't like that, but I have a lot of information to give within the time allotted, so I don't want to go off on fascinating tangents and run out of time. So now we begin. I will share a screen. So beginning. Have you ever left a movie theater feeling, huh? That's because the film didn't end on theme. So first, what is theme? In the context of using it as a tool for story writing, theme is the major emotional issue a story explores. For instance, hunger is a theme, sandwich is not. Because a story explores a theme, it helps to think of theme as a pair of opposites, such as courage and cowardice, love and hate. Love is the theme of so many stories that it has its own genre called love stories. For example, Shakespeare explores the theme of love and hate in Romeo and Juliet. In brief, the story opens with two families who hate each other. Romeo falls in love with Juliet, a girl from the family Romeo's family hates. Romeo and Juliet die for love, which brings an end to the hate. Why is theme important? Theme helps readers feel grounded throughout and satisfied at the end. For an example of what can happen if theme isn't employed, I'll tell you an embarrassing story from when I was a beginning writer. Beginning writers have strengths and weaknesses, and they don't know what they don't know. My beginner strengths were action and humor. I could write a funny scene. I entered my first completed story in a local contest, and it won first place. Being a beginning writer, I assumed that winning first place meant my story was perfect. The prize included reading my story on stage to a large audience. My reading was going well. I could tell because the audience was laughing in the right places. Then I read the last line and there was absolute silence. I glanced up and everyone was looking at me as if thinking, huh? As they politely clapped, I knew I'd lost them at the ending, but didn't know why. And I wondered why my story had won the contest since it obviously wasn't perfect. Turned out there were only 4 entries. Then few months too late, I learned about theme. I hadn't known that I hadn't known about theme. I used it to revise my story. The revised story won first place in much larger contests and was my first story to be accepted for publication. More reasons why theme is important. Theme informs a story's message. For instance, there are many stories with a theme of family that have very different messages, including a family tree can grow lots of nuts, and my family is my dog. Theme connects all the parts of the story, which adds depth and makes the story feel like it's about something. However, theme is not a highfalutin literary conceit. Theme in the context of writing a story is a tool. I'll explain that soon, but first, how to determine your story's theme. Your theme will be the emotional issue that most of your story's ingredients have in common. Your theme will be connected to your protagonist's emotional truth. For instance, if your protagonist was recently widowed, your theme might be loss and gain. But if she murdered her spouse, your theme might be freedom and imprisonment. Long stories have room for several themes. The most successful have an overarching theme that the other themes relate to. For instance, Romeo and Juliet also explores themes of violence and fate, which help to doom the love story. Novels often have subplots. The most successful have subplots that relate to the overarching theme. But short stories need to focus on just one theme, like a magazine article focuses on one topic. If a short story has more than one theme, readers can feel adrift, confused. When to determine your story's theme? You can decide on your theme before you start writing. And if you already know your message, you don't need to decide on your theme because your message already contains it. For example, if your message is never give up hope, your theme is hope, which means your story will probably include the opposite of hope, despair. You can discover your theme while writing your story. This is especially true for memoir writers. We can live our life blissfully unaware it has theme until we start crafting our memories into a story. Now, how to use your theme as a tool. After you've written the first draft, or after you've written any draft, your most recent draft, if you haven't revised it for theme, this is when you can do it. First, use theme to evaluate your story's ingredients. Keep what fits your theme, delete what doesn't fit your theme. For things you don't want to delete, you can slant them so they do fit your theme. Step 2 on how to use your theme as a tool. You can use it to decide your story's structure so that it starts with theme, ends with theme, and has theme throughout the middle so that all the parts of your story are connected. So your readers feel they've read a story that was about something, so that your readers or listeners don't come to the end of your story and think, huh? Now, to demonstrate how theme works in a whole story, I'm going to read a short essay from the Pulitzer Prize winning book, Dave Barry Is Not Making This Up, by Dave Barry. Takes about 7 minutes. Then I'm going to show you where I've highlighted it for theme. You can enjoy this nice slide while I read. It's called Insecticide. Recently, I had to pay several $100s to get my car started. And do you want to know why? Nature. That's why. It's getting out of control. Now, before I get a lot of angry mail on recycled paper, let me stress that generally I'm in favor of nature. I'm even in favor of scary nature, such as snakes, because I know that snakes play a vital role in the ecosystem. But nature should stay in its proper context. For example, the proper context for snakes is Asia. A snake should not be in your yard unless it has your written permission. A snake should definitely not be climbing your trees, although this is exactly what one was doing outside my window a few days ago. I looked out and there it was, going straight up the trunk, looking casual, Mr. Cool-Blooded. It was impressive. I'm always amazed that snakes can move on the ground without arms or legs. You try lying on your stomach and moving forward merely by writhing. My friend Buzz Berger did this for an hour at the McPherson's 1977 New Year's Eve party and never got out of the kitchen. Nevertheless, I was alarmed to see the snake because according to top snake scientists, there is only one known scientific reason why a snake would go up a tree, namely so it can leap onto your head and strangle you. This particular snake had been watching me for several days. I'd seen it on the lawn earlier when I was out with my two dogs, Ernest and Zippy, who were trotting in front, looking alert and vigilant, providing protection. The snake was holding very still, which is a ploy that a snake will use to fool the observer into thinking that it's a harmless object, such as a garden hose or a snake made out of rubber. This ploy is effective only if the observer has the IQ of a breath mint. So it worked perfectly on my dogs, who vigilantly trotted right past the snake. Ernest actually stepped over part of the snake. Of course, if the snake had been something harmless, the dogs would have spotted it instantly. Zippy, for example, goes into a violent barking rage whenever he notices the swimming pool chlorine dispenser. This is a small, benign plastic object that floats in the pool and has never made a hostile move in its life. But Zippy is convinced that it's a malignant entity, just waiting for the right moment to lunge out of the water jaws-like and dispense lethal doses of chlorine all over its helpless victims. I tried to notify the dogs about the snake. Look, I said, pointing, a snake. This caused the dogs to alertly trot over and sniff my finger in case there was peanut butter on it. The snake, continuing to hold still, was watching all this, thinking, this person will be easy to strangle. So now I find myself glancing up nervously whenever I walk across my yard. I'm thinking maybe I should carry an open umbrella at all times as a snake deflector, but that is not my point. By now, you have forgotten my point, which involves my car. One day it wouldn't start, and it had to be towed to our garage, which has two main characters, Bill, who is responsible for working on the car, and Sal, who is responsible for giving you a dramatic account of what was wrong. At first, we thought it was the something, Sal told me when it was all over, but when we tried to something the something, all we got was something. Can you believe it? No, I assured him. So then, said Sal, starting to gesture, we tested the something, but he continued for 10 minutes, attracting a small but appreciative audience. Finally, he reached the crucial dramatic moment where Bill had narrowed the problem down to a key car part called the something. Carefully, Bill removed this part. Slowly, he opened it up, and there inside he found ants. Yes, an ant squadron was living in my car part and eating the wires. I am not making this up. Oh, yes, said Sal, ants will eat your wires. This gave me a terrible feeling of what the French call déjà vu, meaning big insect trouble. Because just a month earlier, the water in our house had stopped running, and a paid professional plumber came out and informed us that, I am still not making this up, there were ants in our pump switch. This is what I mean by nature getting out of hand. It's not natural for ants to eat car and pump parts. Ants should eat the foods provided by the ecosystem, such as dropped milk duds. Something is wrong. And here's another scary but absolutely true fact. Lately, I've noticed ants going into the paper slot of my computer's laser printer. Ask yourself, what natural business would ants have with a laser? You can bet that whatever they're up to, it's not going to benefit mankind, not after all the stuff we've sprayed on them. So I'm worried. I'm worried in my car, I'm worried in my house, and above all, I'm worried that when I cross my yard, I'm afraid that one day I'll disappear and the police will search my property and all they'll find will be a snake who obviously just ate a large meal and is pretending to be a really fat garden hose and maybe some glowing ants munching on, say, the microwave oven. And of course, Zippy, Mr. Vigilant, barking at the chlorine dispenser. Okay. Now, I've highlighted the lines that felt to me like the theme in control and out of control. If you felt a different theme, you aren't wrong because stories are art. So for readers, themes are subjective. The casual reader isn't even thinking about theme. Only Dave Barry knows for sure what theme he was working with in this essay. For theme to be in the beginning, it needs to be somewhere on page 1. It doesn't have to be in the first paragraph, but in this case, it is. Listen for it. Recently, I had to pay several $100s to get my car started, and you want to know why? Nature, that's why. It's getting out of control. So that I heard that placed very strongly at the end of that sentence, at the end of the paragraph, and it really caught my attention. So I went ahead to see if control could be the theme. And this is what I found. Moving on, as you can see from my highlighting, the theme is throughout the middle. And I'm going to go quickly from one highlight to the next. So, should stay in its proper context, which is control. Should not be in your yard unless it has your written permission, is a kind of control. Mr. Cool-Blooded is a controlled person. Moving forward merely by writhing is very well-controlled muscle, so you can do that. Whereas Buzz Burger never got out of the kitchen, so Buzz Burger was not in control. And now we have vigilant, providing protection. Vigilant is very much a control kind of emotional truth. If you're vigilant, you want to be in control. And then holding very still is a very controlled on the part of the snake. Then vigilantly again, and then Zippy goes into a violent barking rage, which is out of control. And then helpless victims have no control whatsoever. And then continuing to hold still, the snake is still controlling his movements. And then by now, you have forgotten my point. Now, this cracked me up the first time I read this, because Dave Barry is saying, okay, my audience is getting out of control here. Now I gotta lead them, get them back to the point that I wanted to tell them about. But of course, he's doing all that in his very controlled way as a writer. And then we have carefully, Bill removed this part. Slowly, he opened it up. So Bill is very controlled in the way he wants to reveal the fact that he found ants. Now, nature is getting out of hand. So we're back to the beginning again, with the fact that nature is out of control. And then something is wrong because it's out of control. And then his worst nightmare is he'll be completely out of control because the snake will have eaten him. So he'll disappear. And then at the very end, Mr. Vigilant, again, barking at the chlorine dispenser. Now, your theme doesn't have to be in the very last sentence like it is here. Just close to the end. He could have ended with his worst fear, that he'll disappear. But by bringing it back to Mr. Vigilant, he was able to end on humor, which is what Dave Barry's all about. So do we have time for questions?
Any questions for her?
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah, Sylvia.
I was intrigued by what you said about memoir as a series of stories, and looking for themes in that. And as a person like many of us, I suppose, who's dabbled a little bit now in memoir, I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that, about how to kind of hone in on your themes.
Yeah. Well, my complete book has a memoir, has not been published yet. I've published about 12 standalones from it. And as I was creating the standalone, I would figure out what the theme was using the process I described here. And each story had a different theme. And I'm wondering, well, what's the whole theme of the book, right? The whole book has to feel like a story because it's just chronological. It's not a series of just separate essays. It's a story beginning to end. So I was able to figure out, I'm not saying it was easy, but I figured out that all of those different themes came under the overarching theme of false assumptions. So my whole book is about the consequences of false assumptions, because that's what all those different stories had in common. Yeah. So I can say, I can give you an example. Okay, like one of my most embarrassing chapters in the book is when I had to use the public baths in, oh, by the way, the book takes place in Seoul, Korea in 1988. And my apartment didn't have what I recognized as bathing facilities. So I had to use the public bathhouse, which was all about exposure. Well, I had made the false assumption that my apartment would have bathing facilities. Right? So, yeah, so that's an example of how the false assumption works into the consequences. Does that help?
Thank you very much. That's fascinating, and I love your example there. That's great. But to think that, yeah, the chapters are standalones in the sense of each having their own theme, but then there's this overarching theme for the whole book. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and of course I had to make the chapter into a standalone. I couldn't just excerpt it from the book. So after I made the standalones, then I had to put them back into the book and take out all the things I'd done to make them standalone.
Interesting.
They exist
Yeah.
in two versions.
Don't you find, I mean, don't you think that it might be more common then for someone to try and write the whole memoir and then discover the theme?
Oh, yeah.
Or, yeah.
My particular adventures just happened to make really good standalone stories. But
That is interesting. I think so many people end up writing it and then have to like rewrite it, because then once they've done it, they found kind of what is supposed to be the driving theme.
oh my gosh, really quickly. I had to totally rewrite my whole book 3 times, because when I first wrote it, I thought it was just random, these random events. And then I found out about culture shock and that I had been, seriously. So then I rewrote it with structure using the culture shock arch. And then I found out, oh my God, it was a feminist book. And I had to totally start from the beginning and put in all the the Korean newspaper articles that I had been reading those whole 6 months, but hadn't realized. So yeah.
It's the kind of thing an author doesn't want to hear. Is like when you get a cold and you secretly think it could be they've got the 3-week cold, but if you told them that on their first go, they just wouldn't make it. They're going to tell them that you're going to have 13 drafts and rewrite it 3 times, and it's going to take 10 years. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much. I could definitely see wanting to share that with many students. Thank you.
Oh,
That
great.
was really a lovely presentation.
If you'd like, I can send you a handout.
Great. Somebody did ask on the chat for a link to the PowerPoint. So that would be terrific. And we can make sure that we hook you up on somebody who'd like to be able to see that.
Okay.
That was Pat C. So thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for joining
guys.
us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. So Steve Cybra, say hello.
Hi there. Good.
Isn't it interesting that, we were talking about control and then that became like the theme. So
Yes.
I won't deviate. All right. Over to you for our first open mic.
And I was quick to point out that I am usually out of control. So, but this piece that I have to read tonight is quite controlled by my standards, I think. And I just want to say that I will have the good fortune of being a feature here next month. And so
Thank you.
I look forward to that. This is a poem called My Grandmother's Lavender Hat. This is kind of not typical of what I read. My grandmother's lavender hat. I decided to dig up my grandmother's grave, to get a second look at the color of her suffering, to wash my skin with the dust of her breath. She baked the chocolate chip cookies too hard. It ruined my father as a child, choking on the things he was told. How special his big brother had been, the one lost in the war of words that proved to be unwinnable. He gave up on her, but I spent every other Saturday weeding the flower beds she treasured, sneaking a peek at the high shelf in her dark, cool closet. She kept a small stack of my uncle's old comics and the faded lilac hat. She caught me there once, pages open on an early issue of the X-Men, but my eyes on the lavender pillbox. Your grandfather loved it so, she whispered, brushing away a purple tear from a cheek as dry as the grave. I asked her, and she modeled it for me. A week later, she was gone, pushed wet into the soil like a violet bulb, but never to sprout, never to bloom, only to fade, to decay. They found me asleep atop her plot, fresh dirt under my nails, fistful of purple crocus. I heard them say I looked so natural, my gray jacket an autumn ghost on the battlefield, like a hiccup in a tall glass of water. Pale lavender shadow dusting my forehead, square as a crown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. That's true. That is uncharacteristic for you, but that's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. If Yvonne would like to say hello, I will introduce her.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Happy to welcome back, even though from the before times, Yvonne Higgins Leach. She is the author of Another Autumn, and her poems connect to the world in a big way through an empathetic heart that seeks to understand the mysteries of the human experience. She does this through perfectly chosen images, simple language, and a genuine voice. Her second collection, In the Spaces Between Us, is forthcoming by Kelsey Books. She spent decades balancing a career in communications and public relations, raising a family, and pursuing her love of writing poetry. Her latest passion is working with shelter dogs, and now she balances splitting her time between Vashon Island and Spokane, Washington. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, Peggy. I'm hailing from Vashon Island, not Spokane, but you'll hear about both tonight. And Lill, great choice in picking Dave Barry. You just can't go wrong, right? That was great. Thank you so much. And you know, Jed and I, we pass at readings and we've seen each other a lot, but what an honor to read with you tonight. And I see some familiar faces, some friends. Hello. And I just want to do a call out to Dawn Vale, who is a lifelong friend and has supported me in my work for decades. So thank you, Dawn. I come from an Irish Catholic family, 6 kids, 2 interesting parents. And my first book was full of family poems. And I thought that I would have worn myself out on writing about my family, but it's not the case. They show up again and again, and my next book is filled with them. And so I thought I would just have a theme, to Lil's point, and focus on some family poems. It was a family of 3 daughters and 3 sons. I will start with a poem that kind of sets the stage where we all appear. And then I'm going to focus on a poem about each one of my brothers, and then finish with a poem about my mom and then about my dad. So this first poem is, you know, with 6 kids, I just can't imagine what it was like. But we didn't go out to dinner much because we were kind of this chaos of movement together. But luckily, my parents found this wonderful restaurant out in North Spokane. It was an Italian place, and it had separate rooms. And so we got to go out because we got to bring the chaos to one little room. And the best part of the evening was we got to save some of the bread scraps and go out and feed the ducks on the pond. This was way back when we didn't know we weren't supposed to be feeding the ducks. So this is called feeding time. Dad gave us permission to save some bread from the basket. Always a special occasion when we went to the Italian place at the edge of town, always on a Sunday night. We folded pieces in paper napkins, watched the cigarette burn to my mother's fingertips, and when she pressed the red butt hard into the ashtray and the last of the red wine slipped down her throat, we knew we were on our way. All 6 of us, crusts left on checkered tablecloths, the patrons turning to look at the child storm leaving the building. Did you know the pond still rests there? The edges rough and mud-ridden. They can't be, of course, but they look like the exact same ducks, black beaks and beady eyes. My brothers rushed ahead, the late light glazing the side of tree trunks. Metallic sheen heads, incessant quacking, and scurrying done the web-footed way. My sisters and I held the edge more carefully, tossed more daintily. What freshness at the sight of creatures so wild and wanting from us. Our bellies full, we delighted in feeding them. I did not want it to end. The pushing past, the water pecking, the necks striking skyward to jolt a piece down their throats. They'd take a finger off if we let them. I flicked a piece as if it were a coin, as if to make a wish. Here's a stroke of luck, I said. I was a stage performer, a child goddess, a wild human creature. To them, I was all there was. I was legendary. So that's all of us. I have 3 brothers. I have a younger brother who I'm very close to, and he's had, fair amount of challenges in his life, but his happy place is fishing. And we go up to a place called Lake Curlew, which is about 30 miles from the Canadian border. I've done it for decades. And I get to watch my brother fish. And it's his happy place, but me watching him is my happy place. My brother fishes Lake Curlew. From my cabin porch, I see him standing at dock's end, rod in hand, like an extended appendage, carved out dawn above the unruffled water. He'll be there all morning, casting and recasting, conversing with silence. How is it that in hiddenness, he sees a flash of silvery scales, sees iridescence, a mouth wide and ready, poised above the jewel-like scattering of sun on water? He waits sometimes hours for the next fish to ghost up from the depths. He sees water the way a fish views it, egoless, forgetting worldly desires, excesses, and discarding regrets. I admire his cell-like humility, his gratitude for what is given from the water, its miraculous things. That's my brother Dan. My middle brother, some of us Irish, we fight addictions. It's kind of in the genetics. And my poor middle brother, Tim, he got the lottery of the addictions. And he spent a lifetime trying to tackle them. And this was a challenging poem because it covers his whole life, starting with his conception all the way through to today. And I really wanted to write a poem that honored him because he has done the work and he's addiction free. On the origin of my brother, for Tim. In the collision of sperm and egg, a creator said, "Let him become." A bright mind, a storyteller, a lover of language, My brother is an ecosystem of contrasts. The pleasantries of life, an evening with family, a job well done, the good storm of children, clash with the cement forests of too much drink, the oil spills of overeating, and the wildfires of gambling. He lives in a genetic landscape of addictions, a life spent wanting another life. When finally the seasons added up and the mountain breathed, he found a way beyond the dark and tired nights, beyond being the helpless animal forced from home. He planted a garden inside himself. He lives. So, thank you. So I have my oldest brother, and he lives on a very limited budget. He has a very simple life, but he doesn't go very many places. But he's very spiritual and he's very grateful with wherever he is. And so I had the fortunate opportunity to bring him with me to spend a few days here on Vashon Island last summer. And it was just so fun to watch his joy and, you know, the tides and the marine life and everything that was so different. And one morning I came out and he was at the shoreline with his hands lifted up. And, you know, coming from Spokane to this was just really fun to give him that experience. And this is a poem about him being here, and it's from his point of view. Visiting my sister's island home. I left behind the basalt rocks of the Scablands to stand in the fold of the ocean's pole. The sand soft under my feet as the tide releases her swell. The robin replaced by a blinking heron. Her tucked wings lustrous as her long legs sidestep the woody rocks. Water light traces the edge of shore in white waves. Like the call of my firstborn breath, I draw salt into my lungs, and as the tilt of light blends itself mysteriously, I lift my arms. There is no in front of me or behind me. Unveiled, I am all air and no air at once. So there's my brothers. I'm going to switch to my mom now. And she, like I said, you know, raising 6 kids, and I just have so much respect for that. And my memory here is she had just settled down to watch a movie for the night. We were all asleep, and I had asthma as a kid. And I had an asthma attack, and I came down and interrupted her, and she helped me through my asthma attack. It's called Duty. D-U-T-Y, Duty. The downstairs den glows with late night TV. My mother settles in to Dr. Zhivago after a day of caring for the 6 of us. When I walk in with my lungs on fire, asthma clenches them into rattle and wheeze. The room is full of air. Air stretches through the house and outside, above our houses and as far as the moon. But the right in front of me air, it wants nothing to do with me. And I see in my mother's expression both sympathy and disappointment. When air doesn't cooperate, she leads me into the small bathroom, moves the rug so I don't sit on cold tile, and turns the squeaky knob to hot all the way to the right. Steam rises, misting the mirror first, then clouds take the toilet. And soon I am drenched in a warm fog, tracing water droplets with my finger as they run jagged down the wall. My other hand in my mother's hand. In time, a strong breath pries open my lungs. She gives me a squeeze and then lets go. So the last poem I'm going to end with is, it's about my father. So he and I are Sagittarians, and we both shared our birthdays 2 days apart. So my whole life my birthday was with my dad. And he passed away, and every birthday I miss my dad and I want to be with my dad. So I'll end on this one and thank you all. On my father's birthday. How is it that certain memories are echoes, loud and repetitive, like hearing a good verb for the first time? Our birthday 2 days apart. Our breaths meld over the liquidy light of candles in a dream haze of wishes. Years now, I blow out candles alone, and the moment the smoke shapeshifts into invisibility, you come again in another form, rare as the shrill of air passing through a condor's wings, and I too know the sound of sky. Thank you all.
No, thank you. It's always so interesting how a theme does emerge sometimes in the reading. So here Lill was talking about theme, and your writing, the pieces you chose tonight had such a centralized theme. That was really interesting. I think of so many people I know with, like, especially as you put it, the one who somehow got the full lottery card. To want to share with them the hope that, that as you said, that garden, he could plant that garden in himself. And he lives. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Susan Gardner, feel free to say hello for open mic.
I have my new book coming out in about a week. And I wanted to read, a couple of years ago, I had a wonderful residency in Ireland, in an old 12th century castle in Ireland. Drizzle dawn. A fret of rain rouses the drizzled day. Mist shimmers, passes, wheels back until for a quarter hour, it lifts to reveal the edges of clouds. On St. Mullen's stone belfry walls above the river, condominiumed nests crowd higher. In flapping air, noisy thousands bank, curl, shift to starboard, circle furiously. Moot meeting of the Parliament of Crows. And one more memory of Ireland, about the same length. At St. Canice's Cathedral, Kilkenny. On the funerary covers, drapery shines black and beautiful. Centuries of parishioners have yielded to its tactile seduction and left a polished ghost of their passing caresses. Flesh and bones consumed by decades ticking on, century yielding to millennia, and none of these lords and their few ladies noticing at all. My hand trails the looping folds of medieval Irish limestone, polished perfect black, a shade thinner, more black now than before I came. And I too am a shade thinner. A microscopic layer of fingertips left on this lady's robe cloaks her eternity. Not mine yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I believe you're scheduled for next month too, aren't you?
I am.
Thank you. Great.
Thank
Lovely
you, Peggy.
previews tonight, our trailers for wanting to leave you wanting more. Yeah. Welcome. Our next reader is Jed. So Jed is the author of Watching the Perseids, The Marriage of Space and Time, and due out in 2024, Learning to Hold. Out in 2023 is his 5th chapbook, The Arcane Mechanics of Constant Lift. I'm not going to read, well, you can say what chapbook competition that was. Recent work appears or is forthcoming in Rattle, Poetry Review, Rhino, the Green Sparrow Review, Rustin Moth, Terrain.org, On the Seawall, Solstice, Nimrod International Journal, and elsewhere. Meyers lives in Seattle, where he's a psychiatrist with a private therapy practice and clinical professor at the University of Washington. He's editor of the journal Bracken. Welcome.
It's lovely to be a part again of It's About Time. I've been familiar with this since like way back when Esther ran it, you know.
Decades. Yeah. We're in about our 32nd or 30 year. I lost track after 30. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. Um, I want to read a few poems tonight. Some of them are from the now published chapbook, The Arcane Mechanics of Constant Lift, put out by Sheila Nagig Editions. And thank you, Haley Haugen, for doing a wonderful job. And you can find this um, at Sheila Nagig and buy one, you know, if you like. Anyway, a few poems from this, and then a few newer poems. I don't know what the theme of the night is. I'm sorry, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Here's a poem called The Wanting. You know, I walk on the Burke Gilman Trail, and there's a lot of rabbits, right? Yeah. The Wanting. The wanting I felt I saw in the dark brown beetle working its way toward the shining eye of the good size rabbit dead on its side by the trail. The wanting in how that tiny legged disk of an insect climbed through what for it was the rough heath of the rabbit's cheek. The wanting gone only hours out of the rabbit, its stillness off its feet, and its tolerance for the bug any live paw would bat at, my evidence for that fresh lack of wanting. Coat still smooth, unnameable color of the earth's cover of dead leaf mulch the rabbit must have been suited for, wanting its life as a body, as my body once mine, as the little live coin of the beetle moved just a thumbnail's width in the moment I watched. It must be one wanting life, the sheen-shielded beetle, the legless, pale feasters sure to inch in by the night. The child I was, at the milk of my wanting I sucked and sucked in the unbroken weaving of mothers and fathers all the way back to the sun-simmered broth of life. I thought, the hunting, the blades, the wanting to kill anything to eat and breathe must be inseparable from our love. And I lifted my eyes past the trees to the road's drumming. So I've got kids who don't yet have kids. So, and this is a poem about, you know, the planetary situation in relation to that. Talk at the end of summer. All my 3 offspring in town for the last of August. We potluck into the dusk on the weathered deck. Big Japanese maple leaning its reddened, breeze-shivered leaves and samaras over us as if to eavesdrop. Low in the plum-purple southeast, Saturn grants us an audience. The kids, grown and partnered, talk of not having kids. No little round mouths irresistibly calling for more rice or milk than there is. No new throats in the drought, and no pink lungs panting for oxygen while it runs out. I see the loose ends of my lineage, bloomless stems, sprouts swept useless across clay hardpan, our uncanny design gone fruitless. There won't be a miracle miniature hand come to clutch my thumb, no pair of womb fresh wide eyes ushering a jaundiced old one back into love's home. So let it be these young, whose genes have swum eons on a rough tide of births wanted and not. Let Saturn see these thoughtful ones, faces dusky as the rose petals fallen along the fence, eyes casting moon-like light before moonrise, lips reposed between soft-spoken reflections. Let my awe show as these once little ones discuss the loss of their intricate code. Will Saturn bless them? Can these dangling seed wings hear? Does anything earthly remember? I'm kissing each child good night. Getting old, of course, prompts some thought and writing, doesn't it? The humility of old men, and that title is the beginning of the poem. The humility of old men climbs in through the soles of their feet, might gout a big toe, might turn an ankle whose ligament got loosed up years ago under a basket, might wear through the cartilage of a right knee on its way to a hip's ball and socket, and on from there it'll flaccid the groin's passion gear, find a pocket of bowel to inflame. It will infiltrate the diaphragm and make camp in the heart, tighten the arteries, stiffen the lungs, and steepen the hills. It will ascend and drill itself into the pulp of teeth, pull down the shoulders, brittle the neck, cloud the eyes, yellow the world. Humility shrinks old men sometimes to a ripeness, a friends with death kind of translucence. Lets us see the well-traveled child who smiles at me from his hospital bed. And I'd like to read one more from the chapbook. It's sort of the title poem, but the poem is not titled The Arcane Mechanics of Constant Lip, but that phrase is in the poem. The poem is called A Prayer. A cormorant crosses a harbor low, wings pulse, keeping an air pillow on the bird's shadow. That black belly a steady few inches aloft. I know a soft blaze glows in that dark fuselage. Fine fire courses a delicate wire web to maintain the arcane mechanics of constant lift. A nameless attunement in that sleek breast resets the ratio heartbeat to wingbeat, pumps clap matching the instant's requirement. That fire's quiet, discreet. We spread our flame out in whatever God's names. Our heat breaches containment. We spark the wind with bright sticks. I watch from an edge of the land we've lit. I see the cormorant reach a buoy and stand, wings held wide to the air, a trusting, a prayer. Thank you. I've got just a few more recent poems. And I'm thinking about what's been said earlier this evening about family, parents, it never goes away. The early time is we live in the land of the gods with our parents and our siblings, and it's with us forever. This is called Trouble's Voice. It's the quiet that wakes me, again up from the night's deepest dream, where the house I lived in rattled and groaned like a freight car. into this blank hour of not a bird call, no freeway hum, no intimate's snore, not a wind out there in its shifting factions among the trees, no sound of a whispered argument, nothing of what, as I grew, I found I could drift to. The night's giants stomping and swearing downstairs, the day's cocksure gods sniping and spitting over me, while knees on carpet I leaned at my ganglord mansion of cards. The music that soothed me was gripe and seethe, tongues whipping across the table at crowded feasts, bang and clatter of angry kitchens. I floated that sweet and sour din. No chance we'd ever allow the air to go still as it is now. It wouldn't have been permitted unless one of us went taken, done in. Here, in the absence of any disturbance, no peace, I listen for trouble's voice. Grant me, please, one good grunted curse in the hall. Thank you. Here's a dad poem called One on One. I know you didn't go till I'd turned 60 and gray. Still, you've got a 9-year-old wondering, can't hurt to ask, will you play one-on-one with me at the hoop outside Marty's kitchen? And I want to show you how I can grab glistening dragons from under flat rocks in the creek down the cliff behind Elliot's. Look, I climb the sheer boulder wall where the stream disappears out back of the Horowitzes. Give it a shot, Pop. Or strap skates on and glide with me over the hot summer asphalt. Sun melting the street enough, our steel wheels'll leave shallow tracks. Show up, will you, through one of these cloud chamber windows? A kid wants you back for some two-hand touch, for a long end zone pass I can catch. Or let's do my wish for a walk along Manayunk's old canal. There's a trail now that hugs river far as Parker Ford. We could make it an overnight, camp there on the banks, dreaming, of course, that you're what flickers this candle, your breath that shivers the light. And here's a mom poem. It's a sonnet. You know how it goes. Once in a while, Villanelle, a sonnet, a sestina, you know. Like Jewish girl from coal country. To find her eyes, she needed to be seen. Her father, in his shop, laced miner's shoes. He closed his eyes before she turned 13. Her mother, proud, would not weep. I have clues. The girl kept scraps, odd buttons, spools of thread. She rooted countless cuttings on her sill. She told me of night visits from the dead. Her grief, still blind, sometimes her eyes would fill. Her husband made the house a fine hotel. He'd take the train back late and start his dreams. She seemed to look through walls or hear a bell. She'd whisper to the morning window's beams. One night when she was old, we talked. She wept. She let herself be held. Then soon she slept. I've one more. Many of us have known Thomas Hubbard, and I'm very saddened by his passing. He was a wonderfully supportive and encouraging human being, and he had a beautiful voice and a beautiful, natural, easy, rambly style of speaking and reading his work. And I wrote him an elegy, called it a eulogy. Eulogy for a poet. Thomas Leo Hubbard, 1938 to 2023. We'd rest our eyes on his tarnished brow, float our ears on his talk's tide, lie down on his wanderings truck bed and doze bumping along the back roads he drove Ozarks to Mexico. We'd drift to his breath's fresh bouquet of drip coffee and cannabis smoke, safely helpless under those thin cirrus gust ribbons he seemed to bring with him. The sky stirred, we'd believe, by that whip of his tongue, trained to humble tale-telling, to waking the heat lightning under our skin. You'd let his eyes settle on your pale hide and listen as his lips undid your cinches. You'd let him dig in, big hands on arms like old wisteria limbs. You'd laugh with him while he troweled your whiteness to fertile dark, and he'd plant yams in your chest. All this before the weakness, when it was just a lead shoulder, just glass crashing like surf in that ceaseless factory in the shells of his ears. After the damn neuron disease had had a few years in him, still his larynx rang rooms like tower bells, long, deep notes washing over us like oceanic plains winds. We'd be his horses rearing, ready to storm in his war for the earth. But no, he's forged a new story. A nomad walks by in beat-up clothes. Where we sleep and eat, his grandparents lived. Word by word, a tent village rises through his ribs. Thank you.
That is a beautiful tribute to, you're right, what a song he wrote for himself in passing. Amazing, and a beautiful elegy / eulogy. If there's a theme tonight, it is about fathers, mentors, the people that we admire.
Yeah.
So it's lovely. Thank you so much for making it, pulling together the theme as it emerges. I'd now like to go to Bob Reeves for open mic. If there's anybody else doing open mic tonight, let me know. But before I lose anyone, I want to say how lovely it is to see a lot of new faces and new names here tonight. And I want you to know that we're always here for still for the present time on Zoom, the second Thursday of every month. You can figure out the time zone or Pacific time zone. And I hope you will come back, and I will see you asking to read the open mic, and it'd be lovely. So come back again, all of you. Bob.
Hi. 2 poems. The first one is The Cinnabar Box. It was never mine, this intricate sphere of wood, which in my memory contained nothing. The halves came apart. The lacquered surface was finely carved into row upon row of tiny flattened scenes, merchants and warriors, mountains and towns, flower arrangements, burdened horses, ships at sea. I grew up with it, didn't especially study it, any dawning aesthetics or lure of Orient unapparent yet. A beautiful thing, yes, that at least, in the living rooms of all our houses, nor was I curious where it came from, a gift from a friend in a higher social tier, single remnant of a stab at art collecting. My memory corrects itself. It held sheet music in a family no surviving member of which was musical, but it was worth money. Mom had had it appraised at $500. That's 60 years ago money. Eventually did unload it somewhere around her final relocation to Washington State. It was never mine, but when I dream it was, and I lost it and wonder what my life would have been like if I'd managed to sell it. But once in a while, I dream I still have the Cinnabar box and am proud I never needed that $500. And this one comes from a recent trip to Victoria, BC. It's called Steve Fonio Beach, Victoria. And for those couple minutes, the blue ocean boasting its pulse against the dwarf rock shelves of Canada, I had my child eyes and my grueling old legs from our tramp through the altered city and 40 years of memory spiderwebbing off my old brain. And not endorsing a child's full body greed and indifference and sheer will to love what it loves, whatever damage comes of it, but nonetheless, child eyes in the clear, uncaptured sky of sun and the rolling earth, rolling its forcing water, and the sheened child in you, squeezing upward through your own coiled, crabbed decades to open a mere gaze on the mere thoroughfares of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Lovely. Also like to say that, like, I heard, I think it was Yvonne who said how great it was to see Don Vale. And I'm like, looking at Don Vale in the background, and I started thinking, who is this Don Vale? And when is he going to read? Okay. I believe we're going to close here with an open mic from Sylvia. And I feel very attached to what she's going to read already.
Yeah, this poem is partly Peggy's fault because we belong to a writing group, and we free write in response to a poem. And Peggy has this ability to look at the verbiage that I will spill out onto a page and say, the poem is there. And she was right, of course. I threw out the first part and the last part, and here's what remained. And it's called How to Mourn. And I should warn you that I had just been watching a documentary about Egyptian funerary practices. How to mourn. Reach inside the narrow slit in your left side. Like an Egyptian funerary technician, pull out liver, spleen, lung, intestines. Put them in canopic jars, but leave the heart in place. Purported seat of intellect and emotion. It's where the pharaohs believed creation starts. A must-have in the afterlife. The heart's the only part you must preserve. Thanks.
You see my pride. I'm all with like Lill, and I think so many of us there. It's so fun to be part of watching other writers succeed. And I've known Sylvia just long enough since she put the poet hat on after other hats that she'd worn in life, to see her excel there as well. So I'm proud and so happy to have been part of, this whole lovely evening. So I think without yet further ado, I'm going to turn off the recording, and so that we can continue to chat if we like. And I just hope that the people who have been doing the reading are able, it's hard to see the chat at the same time because there have been
This is just,
accolades abounding. Yes, Jesse Minkert on open mic.
First of all, I want to let you know that I posted a URL in chat, the first one, where I have put up a sound production built out of a poem called Mosaic on a platform usually for musicians and songwriters called soundcloud.com. And it's available to hear, 6.5 minutes. Doesn't cost anything. You don't have to join anything. And I appreciate it if you would take the time to listen sometime. If it weren't for the weather, the world would be smaller than the imagination insists that it be. If it weren't for the oceans, the world would be drier than life can accept it to be. If it weren't for the weekend, the work would be longer than most would stand it to be. If it weren't for the addiction to hope, the population might be freer than the empires plan it to be. See for yourself how the windows faces. See for yourself how, like the windows, faces open and close. Run while you can, eyes aimed ahead. Forget the scars, the ragged wounds. Turn your face away until your memory can rearrange the furniture. If feet can walk on solid ground, perhaps we'll meet. Perhaps we'll try to speak. Inside this book is nothing real, nothing to help you. The governor says so. Here it comes, and it looks no better nor worse than when it came in here before, which I'd say would be unusual if I didn't know better, if I hadn't been waiting for it to fall across my floor, the shadow it cast on the night, music of breaking window, in the stillness, the quiet of midnight, shattering again into my room, while I hold my hands out, while I hold my breath in as it flies, as it slices through the turgid air. They also dress in bright colors. They also wear feathers and cultured pearls, opportunities to adore themselves. But that's all being pushed down again. The past inundates the present like an exploded dam. Let us spray. Let us release the mists of revelry over the fields of clover and dance with smoke and ashes for as long as summer takes our freezing hands away, and into deeper pockets slips all bitter forms of speech, and out of air siphons fountains of bliss and mountains of intoxication into tiny flasks, into nervous chatter, into sudden collapse, and more that covers the earth with water, dirt, trees, and other diversions. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm sorry I almost cut you out of there. That was a beautiful ending. And I put the URL back in the chat so that people can get it. It's not at the top anymore. So